President Cyril Ramaphosa is joining 4 leaders of the Southern African Customs Union member states in Gaborone, Botswana, for the union's 7th Heads of State Summit. SACU was formed in the early 1900s to facilitate the movement of goods between the 5 member states, South Africa, Lesotho, Eswatini, Botswana and Namibia. It's the oldest customs union in the world. Let's get more on this. We cross live now to SABC News reporter Samkele Maseko, who is there. A very good afternoon to Samkele. Just talk to us about the importance of SACU when it comes to trade.
Well, the importance of SACU when it comes to trade, you'd realize that the unofficial stats as of March 2022, it's about 215 billion rands of intra-trade between these 5 member countries that are represented within SACU. We do know that about 164 billion rands of that amount is the amount of exports that comes out of South Africa to these neighboring countries within SACU. About 50 billion rands are exports coming from these countries into South Africa, which they're exporting into the South African economy. So in essence, SACU is very important when it comes to the intra-trade amongst these 5 member countries of SACU, which was formed in the early years. So in essence, the trade relations between these countries is very important, particularly when you look at the rail and road infrastructure that is used for the intra-trade amongst these countries, particularly now with the discussions around the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement and how it interlinks with SACU and SACU's arrangements and agreements having been there for the longest of time, and they now have to translate these SACU intra-agreements into the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement in order to foster all trade amongst 54 African countries. For instance, President Masisi speaking and opening this SACU Summit as the current chairperson and outgoing chairperson of SACU, saying that COVID-19 has ravaged these countries' economies, and post-COVID-19 they have to reimagine and redesign an economy that is sustainable in order to better the lives of the citizens of their countries, particularly when you look at the deplorable economic social conditions that the people and the residents among SACU member states are currently facing, and how the economy was basically dilapidated and destroyed through COVID-19. Is also saying that the inflation rising is also a burden onto their economies and to the cost of living of SACU member states, saying that they need to come up and devise plans in order to rescue their economies.
Samkele, we know that that's going to be a challenge that affects the countries in the region that we're speaking about. What else is going to be discussed at that agenda?
At this point in time, they are in private discussions, particularly around the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, around some of the backlogs and some of the disadvantages that are there within the various countries' economies, some of the sporadic protests that take place. For instance, when you look in South Africa on the N3 route, which is normally disrupted when truckers are disrupted by community members, with those battles going on in the trucking industry, when trucks are torched, that also affects the trade amongst these countries, as the exports coming from these countries are normally taken out of the Durban harbour, which is big and is massive. The Namibian harbour, which some of the countries can use as an alternative, does not have the infrastructure, does not have the weight duty to carry the weight of some of these exports that come from these countries, as opposed to the Durban harbour, and it is a lengthier route to take to go the Namibian port route. So they'd rather use the Durban port or the Richards Bay port, in essence, to make their trade and exports go faster to the European and to the Western and to the Asian countries that they export their goods to. So in essence, these are some of the discussions that are taking place. Also, the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement is some of the discussions that are taking place, but also the geopolitics that is currently raging in the world, the war between Russia and Ukraine, the escalating prices of fuel, the inflation that's constantly going up. These are some of the discussions that are taking place behind closed doors. We do know that President Ramaphosa is accompanied by the Minister of Trade and Industry, Ibrahim Patel. He's accompanied by the Deputy Minister of Finance, Dr. David Masondo, and also the SARS Commissioner Edward Kitswetter, who is an important player within these discussions of South Africa, particularly when it comes to the issue of duty tax, the issues of customs, and the issue of transportation of goods and the recording of goods in order to further stimulate the South African economy, and that goods that are not legally bound and that are legally smuggled into the country are eradicated. So in essence, these are some of the discussions that are taking place, and also strengthening the intra-trade amongst these 5 member countries of SACU is at the top of the agenda. Interestingly, the president of Namibia did not make the trip to this SACU summit here in Botswana, particularly when you know of some of the allegations that are hovering over the Namibian president and also President Cyril Ramaphosa over the Pala burglary and the allegations of trying to conceal that burglary and also kidnapping and torturing individuals in undue interrogation that was not legally bound. You'd know that Namibian authorities and South African authorities met at no man's land to discuss these allegations hovering the burglary of President Cyril Ramaphosa. So the Namibian president is not here, which will further dampen any of the questions that may have been thrown to him and to President Ramaphosa over the Pala allegations.